Welcome to Depression Wellness Session. This presentation was adapted from resources of Eastern Health Newfoundland and Labrador. My name is Wanda Green. I am a social worker with the mental health program here at Eastern Health. Just a technical issue. The purpose of this session today is to provide you with knowledge and skills related to understanding, identifying, and coping with depression. My hope is that at the end of this session, you'll have a better understanding of depression. You will have learned some tools to help manage it, and you will have some ideas about ways you can move forward towards your recovery journal. At its worst, depression can be a frightening, debilitating condition. Millions of people around the world live with depression. People are afraid to talk about their struggles and don't know where to turn for help. Depression is largely preventable and treatable. Recognizing depression and seeking help is the first and most critical step towards recovery. I'm now going to show a video that was produced by the World Health Organization about depression. The title of the video is, "I Had a Black Dog, His Name Was Depression."
I had a black dog. His name was Depression. Whenever the black dog made an appearance, I felt empty and life just seemed to slow down. He could surprise me with a visit for no reason or occasion. The black dog made me look and feel older than my years. When the rest of the world seemed to be enjoying life, I could only see it through the black dog. Activities that usually brought me pleasure suddenly ceased to. He liked to ruin my appetite. He chewed up my memory and my ability to concentrate. Doing anything or going anywhere with the black dog required superhuman strength. At social occasions, he'd sniff out what confidence I had and chase it away. My biggest fear was being found out. I worried that people would judge me. Because of the shame and stigma of the black dog, I was constantly worried that I'd be found out. So I invested vast amounts of energy into covering him up. Keeping up an emotional lie is exhausting. Black dog could make me think and say negative things. He could make me irritable and difficult to be around. He would take my love and bury my intimacy. He loved nothing more than to wake me up with highly repetitive and negative thinking. He also liked to remind me how exhausted I was going to be the next day. Having a black dog in your life isn't so much about feeling a bit down, sad, or blue. At its worst, it's about being devoid of feeling altogether. As I got older, the black dog got bigger and he started hanging around all the time. I'd chase him off with whatever I thought might send him running. But more often than not, he'd come out on top. Going down became easier than getting up again. So I became rather good at self-medication, which never really helped. Eventually, I felt totally isolated from everything and everyone. The black dog had finally succeeded in hijacking my life. When you lose all joy in life, you can begin to question what the point of it is. Thankfully, this was the time that I sought professional help. This was my first step towards recovery and a major turning point in my life. I learned that it doesn't matter who you are, the black dog affects millions and millions of people. It is an equal opportunity mongrel. I also learned that there was no silver bullet or magic pill. Medication can help some, and others might need a different approach altogether. I also learned that being emotionally genuine and authentic to those who are close to you can be an absolute game changer. Most importantly, I learned not to be afraid of the black dog, and I taught him a few new tricks of my own. The more tired and stressed you are, the louder he barks. So it's important to learn how to quiet your mind. It's been clinically proven that regular exercise can be as effective for treating mild to moderate depression as antidepressants. So go for a walk or a run and leave the muck behind. Keep a mood journal. Getting your thoughts on paper can be cathartic and often insightful. Also keep track of the things that you have to be grateful for. The most important thing to remember is that no matter how bad it gets, if you take the right steps, talk to the right people, black dog days can and will pass. I wouldn't say that I'm grateful for the black dog, but he's been an incredible teacher. He forced me to reevaluate and simplify my life. I learned that rather than running away from my problems, it's better to embrace them. The black dog may always be part of my life, but he'll never be the beast that he was. We have an understanding. I've learned through knowledge, patience, discipline, and humor, the worst black dog can be made to heal. If you're in difficulty, never be afraid to ask for help. There is absolutely no shame in doing so. The only shame is missing out on life.
Let's look at the difference between depression versus sadness. You may hear the word depressed being used by others to describe their mood. They're trying to say they feel sad, frustrated, disappointed, or hurt. However, there is a big difference between sadness and clinical depression. Clinical depression is more intense, it lasts longer, and it significantly interferes with effective day-to-day functioning. Major depression is a combination of events, behaviors, feelings, and changes in your physical self. It is characterized by low mood for 2 weeks or more, with unhelpful thinking styles such as self-blame, guilt, and hopelessness. Physical symptoms include changes in your sleeping pattern, sleeping more or less, changes in your appetite, weight, lower sexual interests, low energy, and low motivation. People with depression may engage in isolation and avoidance behavior. This graph represents the common path of depression. On the left is a scale from 0 to 4, representing your mood and energy. The higher the rating, the better your mood and energy is. The graphed line descending represents mood over time. The bold red arrow pointing downward represents a triggering event that caused your mood to decline. This event can be anything that is significant for you. For example, a change in your work situation, a move, change in a relationship status. The trigger can be very varied for everyone. As you can see, depression is a slow, gradual decline in mood and energy over time. What causes depression? It's not caused by one thing, but a combination of several factors interacting with one another. The two broad categories of causes of depression are biological and psychological factors. What do we mean by biological factors? Genetics is one factor. Depression, we know, does run in families. And although you have an increased vulnerability to depression if it runs in your family, it does not necessarily mean you will become depressed. Research has also shown there are some hormonal changes that occur in depression. So naturally occurring hormonal shifts can result in depression. What about brain chemistry? Neurotransmitters are the chemicals in the brain that regulate mood and other functions such as sleep and appetite. A reduced level of neurotransmitters between nerve cells in the brain can account for symptoms of depression. Now let's look at the psychological factors. What is your thinking style? Negative, rigid thinking styles can contribute to depression. Loss, maybe through death of a loved one or job or friendship, those can be factors that contribute to depression. Feeling that you have failed to meet your goals you have set for yourself can be contributing factors, as can be stress. Stress from your environment and stress from the people that you interact with. How do you know you are experiencing depression? The triggers are the causes of depression that we've talked about. What have you noticed about yourself? It affects all these major areas of our functioning. What is your focus and energy like? How do you sleep? What about your appetite? This would be the physical impacts. How are you feeling? What is your mood like? This would be the emotional symptoms of depression. What kind of thoughts are you having about yourself and others, and about what's happening around you? What have you stopped or started doing? How are you treating others? This represents the behavioral symptoms of depression. We look at all these things interacting together in this 5-area model. Given the right causes or triggers for depression and the interplay between these major life areas, depression can be the result. I'm going to share with you a story. The story does not represent any one particular person, but it highlights a typical story of depression. As I read to you about Angela's story, think about the life areas in Angela's life that are impacted and see if any of her stories sound similar to your experience with depression. Angela has been feeling depressed and dragged out for 3 weeks. Her girlfriends are getting together for coffee. She tells them, "I think I'll pass." Angela is starting to think they don't really want to spend time with her anyway. Next week, Angela has a commitment to attend a dance class with a friend. She's been putting all her energy into work lately, so she decides to skip the dance class. Now she's not going out with her friends, she's not keeping up with her work at home, and she is skipping her commitments. She has a decreased appetite and noticed that her clothes is feeling a bit loose. She has difficulty falling asleep and often wakes early in the morning and is unable to get back to sleep. She's feeling sad, overwhelmed, and thinks, "What is wrong with me? I am losing control." For many of us, we struggle with accepting that we are experiencing what may be a depression. What symptoms of Angela's can you relate to? How long was it for most of you between the time you noticed your symptoms and when you did something about them? What have you done to try to manage your depression? If we look now at managing depression, we'll focus our attention on what we can do to treat and improve and recover from depression. Here's the graph we just looked at. This gradual decline in mood is when we realize we need help. We are now almost at a 0.5 in terms of our rating of depression. It's our lowest point. Many people make their first stop to their family doctor. You tell your doctor how you're feeling, how you've been affected by the changes that's going on around you, and after some medical investigation to rule out other possible diagnoses, your doctor determines that you are experiencing depression. Your doctor recommends medication. So this flat line at the bottom of our graph represents the point when you seek help. You are started on an antidepressant medication, which is aimed at improving the chemistry of your brain to treat depression. You are likely told it'll be 3 or 4 weeks before you begin to see any effects or improvement from the medication. The red bold hour on the left of the graph represents the point at which you start to see some improvement in your mood due to the introduction of medication. What most of us are inclined to do when we start medication is to go home and think, I can't possibly wait 3 or 4 weeks. It seems like it's going to be forever, but you sit home waiting for the medication to take effect. However, medication helps somewhat for most people and can be effective. What medication does not treat is the learned aspects of behavior, the learned aspects of depression, the behaviors that you changed because you were depressed, the negative thinking you developed because of how you were feeling, the social isolation that you have decided to manage your symptoms. Medication can help, but it's not the only thing that is needed. Because when we are depressed, we stop doing things. Normally, if you get a flu, you rest. You don't do anything. You wait to get better. If you have a bad arm, you stop using your bad arm until it gets better. It's instinctual to stop doing what's painful. It makes sense, but unfortunately for depression, it doesn't work that way. It isn't helpful. It makes things worse. Medication does not change those things that we have learned. What is the treatment? Yes, medication is an important part of the treatment, but medication needs to be combined with other treatment strategies. Self-directed management of symptoms. Those are the things that you can do yourself to help you improve your mood. Look after yourself. Self-care. Educate yourself about depression. You may need additional counseling, which is available to you through your regional health authorities. If you see a counselor, the treatment of choice for treating depression will be cognitive behavioral therapy. So if we look again at this 5-area model, we can see the interplay between thoughts, emotions, behaviors, and our physical self that impact our current state of depression. What we are going to do now is flesh out the different areas that depression affects. We'll start with our emotions and our thoughts. Maybe many people mix up the difference between emotions and thoughts. They group emotions and thoughts together and can't distinguish what's a thought from a feeling, probably because they are so overwhelmed. We'll start by looking at feelings. This is a depiction of caricatures of common emotions. People often struggle with knowing how to describe their emotions. I apologize for the quality of the picture. However, what emotions do you relate mostly with how you're currently feeling. Are you overwhelmed? Are you feeling anxious? Are you sad most times? Maybe angry. Maybe you're frightened, shy. Hopefully, you're hopeful. Maybe you're engaged. You're ready to do the work. It is really important to understand our feelings. Emotions provide us with information about our environment. Every emotion has a job to do. For example, anger often comes up to motivate us to work towards something to change. It lets us know that our boundaries are being pushed or our needs are not being met. This allows us to choose to yell, to be silent, to assert ourselves. Anger motivates us. Similarly, when we experience the emotion of fear, it tells us that something could be dangerous. We have the option to avoid what is potentially dangerous or to challenge it. Our emotions provide us with valuable information. You can't avoid your emotions. You need to be able to manage them effectively. Sadness, a common symptom or emotion of depression, motivates us to engage in our environment and create attachments. Sadness isn't depression. Depression isn't an adaptive emotion. It is natural to feel pain when we lose something we cannot regain. Sadness helps us to navigate this, and there are many purposes to the expression of sadness through tears. Recent research shows that mild sadness, that's not depression, makes us more attentive to details and more generous. We can decide what action to take within that sadness. In the same way, we can feel depressed and have a strong impulse to avoid situations or isolate ourselves because of our depressed mood. But we need to choose to approach the situation because we know that this is what will help on our recovery journey. Feelings are often the last thing to change. You might not feel like doing what you need to be doing, but by gradually beginning to do the things you need to do and the things that you stopped doing because you were depressed, things will start to change. The goal for recovery is to be able to live a more vibrant life. And that is the reason we want to understand our feelings and be able to address them. Now let's look at thoughts. Imagine you're walking down the street and you see someone you know. You wave and you smile at them, but they don't wave back. What do you think? Maybe you think, what did I do? They must be angry with me. They don't like me. Those are your thoughts. Maybe they didn't see you. Maybe they are preoccupied with something else. You can have many different thoughts and many different responses to the exact same scenario. Remember, thoughts are not facts, and not all thoughts are true. Our thoughts are filtered through our perceptions, attitudes, and our beliefs in that particular moment. The brain fills in the gaps of information with what it thinks to be true. It is necessary that we seek evidence for and against our thoughts. We need to become more aware of our thoughts. They're helping us. Are they helping us or are they harming us at any given moment? We can often figure out our thoughts by our feelings. I'm feeling sad because I'll never get better. What comes after the because is a thought. Your feeling is, I'm feeling sad. The thought is, I'll never get better. Our thoughts affect our behavior. If you feel sad, believe you'll never get better, then what is your behavior likely to be? Well, I'm optimistic that because you're listening and watching this presentation today, that you are optimistic and you are ready to take action and change your behavior. We have patterns of thinking, which is often influenced by what we pay attention to. If I ask you to say out loud the word silk 3 times, go ahead, say it. Silk, silk, silk. What do cows drink? Many people will say cows drink milk, when clearly we know cows drink water. Okay, try this one. Spell P-O-T-S 3 times. P-O-T-S, P-O-T-S, P-O-T-S. What do you do when you come to a green light? How many of you thought you stop? Of course, we all know that green means go, but because we focused on POTS, which is stop spelled backwards, we conditioned ourselves to think that a green light means stop. It's very important to pay attention to your thoughts and slow down your thoughts so you can clearly focus on the details. If you slow down your thoughts and focus on the details, you will not be tricked into falling into thinking traps that distort your reality. I'm going to show you a brief video that helps illustrate this point.
This is an awareness test. How many passes does the team in white make? The answer is 13. But did you see the moonwalking bear?
That video illustrates that what we pay attention to is what we notice. If we pay attention only to passes, we may miss something that's very obvious. Now I want to talk for a minute about suicidal thoughts. One thing that happens to our thoughts when we are distressed or depressed is that we may experience suicidal thoughts. When this happens, it can feel like there must be something wrong with me to be thinking about suicide as an option. It's important to know that while suicide is a risk for individuals living with depression, suicidal thoughts are a common symptom of depression. Suicidal thoughts without a plan or an intent to follow through with those thoughts is what we call passive or vague suicidal ideation. Typically, individuals will say, I don't want to die, but I keep thinking about suicide. If you are experiencing suicidal ideation with a plan, that means you give thought to how you intend to die by suicide. So you have a plan and you have a clear intent about carrying out that plan. This is considered a very serious situation that requires immediate attention. You may need to go to the emergency department nearest you. You may need to call the mental health crisis line, which in Newfoundland is 1-888-737-4668, or you may need to talk to and involve family and friends who can be a support and help keep you safe. Remember, when suicidal thoughts become plans with intent, it is very serious, and the goal then is primarily first and foremost to keep you safe. Now we're going to focus on the physical symptoms of depression. When someone experiences a clinical depression, they experience a change in their physical self. Your digestive system becomes slowed down, which leads to decreased food intake due to lack of appetite. You may develop difficulties with bowels, constipation. There could be an increase in physical pain or headaches, which then leads to decreased activity because you're not physically feeling well. There's decreased energy, which leads to avoidance of social situations and probably increased time spent in bed. Other physical symptoms, because of decreased interest and energy, leads to less attention to your physical appearance or hygiene. Getting a shower can be very overwhelming when you have low energy. Anxiety levels may increase, which leads to negative coping strategies. And some of those negative coping strategies could be the use of alcohol or other drugs to numb or self-medicate. You may be prone to infections, which can lead to more sickness and lower activity and energy levels. All of these physical symptoms are common for someone who's struggling with depression. How does our behavior change when we become depressed? Decreased energy and interest leads to decreased activity. Neglecting self-care, as we just talked about. Something as simple as brushing your teeth becomes difficult, not to mention a regular physical fitness activity or getting outside to get fresh air and some physical activity. You discontinue pleasurable activities, things you once enjoyed and felt satisfaction in doing now becomes difficult to engage in. You neglect important tasks such as bill payments, meal preparation, household maintenance, and you may even engage in mindless activities such as binge watching Netflix, aimlessly scrolling through your electronic devices with no real purpose. So if we look again at the 5-area model, we can see that depression impacts all areas of our being. Each area of ourself impacts the other. Depression can be overwhelming, but when we break it down into parts, it's more manageable to work with. Making a small change in one area can have a significant impact on all other areas of depression. Understanding this is the important skill towards recovery. We are now going to focus on a few common myths about depression. As we go through these, I want you to ask yourself, do you believe this is based on truth or is based on myth? The first one we're looking at is people with depression are lazy. Truth or myth? Hopefully you said myth. Experiencing depression impacts your energy and enjoyment level. Most people with depression are very fatigued. It decreases your motivation, so you don't feel like it and you don't have the energy to do it. Depression also zaps your pleasure. As such, it might look like you are lazy, but it's important to recognize that this is the result of symptoms of depression that are impacting your ability to function. It's also important to know that for some, they experience what we call diurnal mood variation. And what that simply means is that your energy level doesn't start to improve until late in the day. You might have very low energy level in the morning and it improves slightly as the day progresses. So it may feel like mid-afternoon before you feel like you have the energy to get going and to do what you plan to do for the day. Some people are always happy and some people are always depressed. Truth or myth? Myth. As this graph illustrates, the top line represents the mood fluctuation of someone who does not have depression. The bottom lighter line represents mood fluctuation for someone who does have depression. Mood varies even in people who are healthy. So nobody has what people call a stable mood. We all have good days and not so good days, better days and difficult days. For someone who has depression, it may look lower and be not as good as someone who has what would be considered normal mood. Because things happen in our lives and in our bodies that impact our moods, some days will be good, the sun is shining. Other days, we didn't get a good night's sleep and it's not a good day. That happens for everyone. Medication used to treat depression is addictive and could result in drug abuse. Truth or myth? Myth. Medication can be a useful helper for individuals with depression. The medication typically prescribed to treat depression are non-addictive, and individuals are able to decrease or stop the medication when it is no longer needed. However, it is very important to only do so under the care and direction of your physician. Discontinuing meds can create negative physical effects if you do so prematurely. There's no research that shows that individuals who use antidepressants to treat depression are any more prone to using other harmful substances than the general public. Next myth, anyone can become depressed at any age. Truth or myth? Truth. Depression can happen at any stage or age of life. People can have mental illness and be mentally healthy at the same time. Truth or myth? This is a graph to illustrate the distinction, to illustrate mental illness continuum and a mental health continuum. On the horizontal line, we have a continuum of mental illness that starts from no mental health or mental illness symptoms on the right and progresses to serious mental illness symptoms on the left. On the vertical axis, we have mental health. Optimal mental health, progressing to poor mental health. Someone can have a mental illness and still be functioning with optimal mental health. Someone can have no mental illness and still have poor mental health. So, it goes without saying that you can have a mental illness and still function well. You have to feel depressed to be depressed. Truth or myth? Myth. Emotions are only one aspect of the illness. Some individuals have more cognitive symptoms. Sometimes people have more physical symptoms, but they don't necessarily feel depressed. They can have all the other symptoms of depression and still have a clinical depression. You have to be crazy to think about suicide. Truth or myth? Myth. Firstly, the word crazy is very stigmatizing. It implies judgment about those who are thinking of suicide. We must change these stigmatizations by changing how we think and how we talk about depression and suicide. Recognizing that thoughts of suicide is a symptom of depression. It is not like any other symptom of depression. Psychotherapy makes you dependent. It's better to solve your problems on your own. Truth or myth? Psychotherapy and sessions such as this one give you strategies that you can incorporate into your life. You will be solving your own problems, but with proven and effective strategies that the clinician is aware of. It may be difficult to do this on your own. Most people receive what they need in 6 sessions or less from psychotherapy. In other words, you won't become dependent on therapy. We will teach you the skills, but you solve your problems independently. Exercising 3 times a week can be as effective as an antidepressant medication. Truth or myth? Truth. Studies have shown that it's true. If you're already using an antidepressant, don't discontinue it and say, okay, I'll exercise 3 times a week. We encourage anyone considering changes to their medication to speak to a physician before that happens. But research has shown that exercising 3 times a week can be as effective as using medication. Together, exercise along with medication is very effective. And finally, all depression passes with time. Truth or myth? Some people do receive what we call spontaneous recovery. However, it's rare. As we discussed, as we talked about the 5 areas, our thoughts, emotions, physical symptoms leads to us changing our behavior. I like to say depression creates the condition for depression to continue. It makes us isolate, to think we're horrible people, difficult to recover. Treatment can be medication, psychotherapy, and the tools we'll talk about here today. The good news is that with treatment, individuals can achieve recovery and depression can be treated effectively for most people.
%31 ball of excitement, 28% cool nana, 19% head chef, 8% bake-off queen, 6% big-time competitor. She's more than just a person with depression, mental illness and addictions. Understanding changes everything.
The goal to recovery is living a more vibrant life. You need to learn how to manage symptoms and be able to recover. Depression is an illness. Like other illnesses, some individuals will have this illness acutely, others will have it intermittently, meaning they'll have several episodes with remissions, and some will have chronic depression without complete remission. Most individuals with depression will experience symptom remission with treatment. For those who do not experience remission with treatment, the goal is similar to treatment for other chronic health conditions such as diabetes. The goal is to manage the symptoms. Even if you're in a category of chronic depression, changing your behavior can result in significant changes to your quality of life. Remember, symptoms look different for everyone. Recovery looks different for everyone. Feelings are the last thing to change, but you can change your behavior and eventually your feelings will catch up. Remember, the hopeful news is that what we have learned can be unlearned with practice. You can start to make small steps towards unlearning how to be depressed and relearning how to be healthy. These small steps could include engaging activities you used to enjoy, learning to look at things differently, connecting with others so you have more support around you. One small change in one of the 5 areas we will teach you about can affect all the other areas that we've looked at. As you can see from this graph, it represents the introduction of a small change. Where you are today is where the horizontal and vertical axes meet. As time passes, which represents the horizontal axis, you will start to see improvement even if you introduce a very small change. And at the time that you introduce that small change, it might not look like much. But one small change early on can have a large impact after time. It might not seem like it, but for example, if you take your medication at the same time every day, or if you take a 5-minute walk every day, we can show you that it will make a big difference in the long run. Let's say, for example, you make a commitment to make a change of waking up and getting out of bed at the same time every day. Imagine if you wake up and get out of bed every day, it increases the chances that you might eat breakfast. That's a behavioral change. This might give us some energy, which increases our physical wellness. So with more energy, we might be inclined to get dressed. That's a behavioral change. Now that we're dressed, we notice it's nice outside, which is a change in our thinking. So we look out the window and we notice the beautiful things in nature. And we're feeling a little at peace, a little grateful for our day. That's an emotional change. We're awake, we're out of bed, we're dressed. The phone rings. There's a better chance we might answer it and have a brief conversation with a friend. That's a behavioral change. This might lead to a laugh or a joke. And for the minute, we're feeling a bit uplifted. That's an emotional change. We might think, wow, I'm glad I have a friend who can make me laugh. That's gratitude. It's a change in your thought. All of the different areas of your life have been impacted by your small change of deciding to get out of bed at a particular time. That's the impact of making small changes. You have to remember, though, that we need to build our capacity to feel depression within our minds and bodies and not get off course with our actions. It takes patience, practice, and persistence. The depression didn't become a problem overnight, and it will not get better overnight. It will take practice, patience, and persistence with intentional change being the motivating goal. Your goal is to change the depression. You're not removing the depression, you're changing your relationship with it so it doesn't pull us away from being the person you want to be, behaving the way you want to behave, and spending time the way you would like to spend your time. We will still have the experience of depressed mood as we slowly begin to build back into our lives and activities what we'd like to do. Change is difficult and will take time. Think about a time when you made another big change in your life. Maybe you are someone who quit smoking, changed your diet, moved to a new town. It wasn't immediate that you felt good about it. As a matter of fact, in the beginning, it may have felt very difficult. It took time to adjust and see the positive. You may feel discomfort. You may feel unsettled by the change. It takes time to notice the positive effects. Let's look specifically at strategies to change our behavior. Strategy 1 is the observation or noticing when you are engaging in unhealthy or unhelpful behaviors. And you can gradually make changes. But for now, I want you to start thinking about and observing when you are making unhealthy choices. Because most people don't really give a lot of thought to this. It just is a behavioral pattern they fall into. But when your family has an event or a get together and you choose not to go, ask yourself, why am I not going? I'm tired. I don't want to put the effort out. It's just about recognizing this is the choices I am making and this is a result of my depression. Observe it, become aware of it. The second part, which is really important, is what we call behavioral activation. and it's making a commitment to take action, even if you don't feel like it. Remember, action precedes motivation. We will never truly be motivated to move towards discomfort. Who would ever make that choice? Change and action has discomfort attached to it. We have to make a commitment to engage in behavior that's going to help us move toward what's uncomfortable before we can move past it. One suggestion I have for you is to write down what you are committing to do. Make a weekly activity schedule if necessary. For each day of the week, make a commitment to change your behavior, to do something different. Now, we can increase the possibility of you actually following through with that commitment if you tell someone who's a good support for you. Tell them what you're committing to. Write it down. Put it somewhere where it's visible. Do whatever it takes to increase the chances that you will actually follow through on your commitment. Now let's look at skills to address how we are feeling. I want you to know that emotions are adaptive and have a purpose. We have talked about that a little. Our natural tendency is to struggle with the unpleasant feelings and wish they would go away. So I want you to imagine there's a switch in your head. When the switch is on, we call it our struggle switch. We experience an uncomfortable thought, feeling, or sensation, and we fight against it. We try to avoid it, to get rid of it. For example, maybe the emotion that shows up might be sadness. If your struggle switch is on, then the sadness seems unacceptable. And then we have thoughts about the unacceptable nature of our sadness. Oh, I shouldn't be feeling so sad. Why can't I just stop feeling sad? So now we are not only thinking about the sadness, but we're thinking about and struggling with feeling sad about the sadness. This creates feelings of guilt and frustration, which causes more distress. And do you see how it starts to spiral out of control? Now imagine you turned off your struggle switch. Whatever emotion shows up, no matter how unpleasant it is, choose not to struggle with it. So if sadness shows up, we may not like it. It's unpleasant, but it's not a problem. We have less fear of it and we learn to tolerate it, but we're not struggling with it. When sadness rises and falls, we just let it come and go. We're not wasting our energy struggling with it. It's just there, and we are accepting its presence. Focus on noticing your emotions. Where are they in your body? Imagine them rising and falling like waves, but just notice it. Don't struggle with it. Have a willingness to approach your emotions, to experience them rather than trying to numb them. Most people struggle with dealing with their emotions. Imagine your feelings and emotions are like a beach ball floating in a pool. What happens when you try to push your emotions down or hide them beneath the surface? You know what happened. They eventually pop up anyway. So be willing to approach and accept your emotions, not hide them. Try to suppress them or numb them. Practice gratitude. Research has shown that practicing gratitude improves depression. Depression affects our feelings of connection to others, and practicing gratitude can boost this feeling of connectedness. We also know that with depression, we have what's called a negativity bias. So when we're depressed, we're much more likely to notice negative things throughout our day. Practicing gratitude can help us learn to notice positive things throughout our day. The method is simple. Take time each day to write down 3 things you are grateful for. It doesn't have to be anything big. It's best to choose a time to do it. Right after you eat, when you wake in the morning, before you fall asleep at night. There's also many available apps that help you keep gratitude journals. Or maybe you prefer to write things in a special place where you can reference them quickly. What are you grateful for today? Now let's focus on strategies to address our thoughts. What are the strategies to uncover our thoughts? You need to pay attention to your automatic thoughts. Complete this statement. I feel sad because. What comes after the because is a thought. I feel sad is an emotion. I feel sad because that's a thought. There is a strong connection between our thoughts and our feelings. It's important to be aware of our thoughts. Change our thoughts and we can change our feelings. How can we change our thoughts? We need to examine the evidence to be clear about whether or not you have confused the thought with a fact. Remember, thoughts are not necessarily facts. Just like our illustration when you meet someone on the street and they don't say hi. There are any number of explanations as to why that happened, and your explanation is not necessarily the facts. Double standards is something that often happens for people who are depressed. Ask yourself, what would you say to a friend who is experiencing what you are experiencing? Very often, we don't apply the same standard to ourselves as we would to our friends. Separate or diffuse from a thought. For example, if you said 3 times, I notice I'm having a thought. I noticed I'm having a thought. I noticed I'm having this thought. Do you notice a difference between what people notice? If you can recognize that a thought is just a thought, there's space. There's space between the thought and the belief that the thought is correct. So just make your thought an observation. Oh, that's a thought. I noticed I just had that thought. Another strategy for diffusion is using and instead of but. And I'll illustrate that with an example. If I said, I want to call my friend, but I'm not sure if I can because I don't know what to say to her. If I replace that by saying, I want to call my friend, and I'm not sure if I can because I don't know what I'll say to her. We've changed but to and. Do you hear a difference? How does changing the language give a different message? Changing that language in that statement to and still increases the probability that you still call your friend. Using but decreases the probability that you will want to call your friend. So it's really important to establish some distance between your thoughts and your feelings. Connect your thoughts to your values. I want to improve. So are these thoughts moving me in the direction of improving or not. Are your thoughts helpful or are your thoughts hindering your progress? If you can say that your thoughts are hindering your process, then that's probably not a valuable thought for you to engage in. Coping statements, self-talk. Self-talk and making coping statements is an important strategy for motivation. I've handled it before, I can handle it now. These feelings will pass and I'll be okay. These are just thoughts, not reality. These thoughts and feelings are only depression. They're not dangerous. I can handle it. Self-compassion and self-talk is important. Give yourself permission to make mistakes, to learn and to grow, and to not know all the answers. I don't know anyone who knows all the answers. Be flexible. There's not only one way of doing this. There are many ways to reach the same goal. Aim for good enough, which is partway between not doing it at all and doing it perfectly. Simply aim for good enough. Self-talk. Okay, you can step back or take a time out if you need to. I'll do what works. Self-talk and coping statements is really about being your very own cheerleader. It's much more powerful if you become your own cheerleader than having people cheerleading you on. Yes, that's very valuable too. But when you become your own cheerleader, you own the statements. Now I want you to think of one coping statement that you need to tell yourself. Repeat it to yourself daily or write it and display it somewhere as a reminder. Some people like to think of it as a bit of a mantra. Do what works as long as it's safe and it doesn't make things worse. So as you know, unsafe examples would be maybe using drugs, alcohol, misusing medication, staying in an unhealthy relationship, engaging in behavior that's dangerous to your health. You need to be your biggest supporter. Now let's turn our attention to address our physical needs when we are depressed. Sleep hygiene is very important. And by sleep hygiene, we're talking about all of the things that you do to contribute to healthy sleep routine. It means having established sleep routine that is healthy and ensures you have an opportunity for proper rest and sleep. Have a routine for going to bed and for when you get out of bed. Avoid caffeine and alcohol at least 2 hours before you go to bed. Do calming activities when you are winding down for bedtime. Do not engage in screen activities while in bed. These are just a few suggestions. Sleep hygiene is very important. And although our sleep is negatively impacted by depression, once we focus on and establish healthy routines, we increase the likelihood that our body will adjust to a better sleep routine. Improve nutrition. People who are depressed often have low appetite, skip meals, or maybe engage in emotional eating and engage in eating unhealthy food. Nutrition is very important to treating depression. Practice deep breathing. Deep breathing is a relaxation technique. performed by purposely taking slow, deep breaths. And when practiced regularly, deep breathing provides immediate and long-term relief from stress and anxiety. I'll take a minute and just walk you through what a simple deep breathing exercise might look like. Sit back or lie down in a comfortable position. Close your eyes if you'd like to. Try placing your hand on your stomach. As you breathe deeply, you should begin to feel your belly expand. You should notice the rising and falling of your belly with the inhalation and exhalation of each breath. The idea of deep breathing is to ensure that you're getting the air deep into your lungs, which pushes on the diaphragm, thus expanding the belly. Breathe in slowly through your nose. You hold the air in your lungs for a brief few seconds and slowly breathe out through your mouth or your nose, expelling all of the air from your lungs. We'll do it and I'll count for the inhaling breath. I'll do a brief count of 4, hold for 2, and then exhale for another count of 4. Okay, here we go. Inhale slowly through your nose. 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold, hold, and exhale. 4, 3, 2, 1. If you practice that for at least 2 minutes, it is likely that you will improve the stress levels of your body. You are balancing the exchange of oxygen and carbon dioxide in your body, and your body will be thankful. Another skill for dealing with tension is progressive muscle relaxation. If you experience tension in your body through your muscles, this is a technique focusing on tensing and releasing your major muscle groups to relax your body. You can start from your head or from your feet and work your way up, progressing through each of the major muscle groups. If you start in your feet, you squeeze your toes together, pulling them tight towards the bottom of your foot. You hold, you feel the tension in your foot, and then you release. And you feel the tension as it flows out through your toes. You progress up to your legs, your torso, your arms, your shoulders, and face. There are lots of progressive muscle relaxation guided meditations on Bridge the Gap through the therapy assisted online platform, or many available through YouTube and other internet resources. As we come near the end of this presentation, I'd like to ask you these questions. What would you be doing if depression wasn't a problem for you? If you could continue with this change process, what discomfort and or distress do you expect to show up? How would you respond when you encounter that distress or discomfort? Why would you keep going if the changes with the changes if the distress was intense. Do you feel now is the time to take it on? Motivation is a major factor in how well you progress with this work. And I happen to believe that because you are here listening and watching to this presentation, that you are ready to make those changes. We have given you, hopefully, hope for improvement, a willingness to try, courage to begin, and a connection to supports that are available to you. What's also really important is you need to see recovery as a journey. It's a journey with a chance to learn, to grow, and build. And yes, you will make mistakes. But mistakes are simply teachers, lessons to learn something new. You also have ability to practice and try even when you don't see improvement, even when you get discouraged, because we know now that behavior has to change first before you start to feel different. And you need to make a commitment to yourself. I want to share with you some resources that are available to you. And this is not an exclusive list by any means. As mentioned earlier, this presentation is brought to you through Bridge the Gap, www.bridgethegap.ca, which has a very comprehensive list of resources that are available to residents of Newfoundland and Labrador. I won't itemize them all, but I encourage you to explore this site to try many of the resources that are available to you. I also want to say, as mentioned earlier, if you are in crises, there is a mental health crisis line available to you. And please do not hesitate to reach out. The number again is 1-888-737-4668. So let's review what we have covered in today's session. We now have increased knowledge, awareness, and understanding of depression. An understanding about the connection between thoughts, feelings, physiology, and our behavior. We have the ability to identify unhelpful thinking and to challenge it. We have a plan to change our behavior. We've also learned about the importance of acceptance, compassion, self-talk, and motivation. I want to thank you for your time and say it's been my pleasure sharing this information with you. I hope the information presented assists you on your recovery journey, and I wish you all the best. Have a great day.